This is the Specialized Levo 4 S-Works. Yeah, the new bike launched a couple of months ago. So what do you expect from a Specialized S-Works bike? Super light, carbon, everything, right? And if we look at the previous Levo S-Works bikes, I remember the first one, it was the 2019, I believe, second generation Levo. To me, that's like the original Levo. That's when they introduced all of these new cool features. I mean, they were pretty much the first ones to make a detachable battery without making a huge hole somewhere in the down tube. They had a smaller one down here, so you would slide the battery out. And it was not the most convenient way of removing the battery, but it was possible. And it was saving quite a bit of weight because the battery was just bolted to the down tube with a few hex bolts. And the small opening at the bottom of the frame, that's already there for the motor. So there was no other extra reinforcement on the down tube due to the changes. I mean, due to the detachable battery. And this one, though, it has got a detachable battery, and it's not like the 500 watt-hours battery that the Levo S-Works previously used to have. No, it's a big 840 watt-hours battery that detaches from the side. So you use an Allen key, remove a bolt that allows you to remove the lid, and it simultaneously unlocks the battery, so you can just tilt the battery out. Big and chunky one. But that does of course mean the Levo 4 S-Works, it's not as lightweight as it used to be. I remember us saying, why would you buy an SL bike, a weak bike, when you could get a full power bike at almost the same weight with much more power? And, well, apart from it being quite a bit more expensive, we can't say that anymore because this bike is 24.4 kilos with these Bergtech pedals, and so about 24 kilos without pedals. It's not super heavy for a full power EMTB, but it's not the light EMTB some of us perhaps was expecting. But that makes sense. Big battery, properly burly Specialized Butcher Grid T9 tires, nice grippy solid tires. For a 160 mil travel bike, 150 rear, 160 front, Specialized could have gotten away with a Fox 36 fork, but no, they wanted the extra performance and ruggedness of the 38 forks, and I think that's a great choice. There are some components on this bike that does save weight, like the Roval Traverse HD carbon wheels with the DT Swiss 240 hubs. They are properly nice, and I think they probably add to the handling of the bike. Surprisingly nimble and fast steering for a relatively heavy, burly full suspension bike. In other news, you got the Genie shock at some sort of technology developed by Specialized, and we rode the bike, and the rear end was quite pleasant, but I'll get back to that. To me, it was sort of the front end that was standing out in various situations. So you got the new transfer dropper wireless with this quite chunky battery holder transmitter or whatever. You got the SRAM XX transmission, 12-speed drivetrain, carbon handlebars. I really like this seat. I guess it's lightweight due to all the holes, but it's quite comfortable. I wasn't prepared for how changed this bike is. Specialized always used to have sort of this brace bar on the side, and that's gone. Geometry is gone. I mean, the frame looks completely different, but the motor, yeah, it doesn't look that different, but it is. The new Specialized 3.1 motor, it doesn't have the internal belt system anymore. Now it's metal gears. Specialized claim it's still a very silent motor. Still a silent motor while coasting and such. And it's a much more powerful motor. At 720 watts, 111 newton meters for the S-Works version, you might think it can't be as powerful as the DJI motor, can it? We tested it, and we'll get back to that in more detail. But I'd say it can, and it can even surpass the 850 watts version of the DJI motor. I know it's been updated to 1000 watts, but at lower cadence, I'm pretty sure that can't be felt. I think what happens when they increase the power and leave the torque is that you have to go to a higher cadence to get above 850 watts and to access the extra 150 watts. So a really powerful motor, powerful over a wide cadence range. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much about the motor because you should check out the upcoming motor review where we present the data and compare this motor against the DJI 850 watts version and the new Bosch CX Gen 500 Newton meters. So yeah, the motor has changed a lot, and I mentioned the frame has changed a lot. Apart from what you can see visually, it's the geometry. 435 millimeter chainstays. That's properly short. And these days, there are few bikes being introduced with that kind of chainstay length. And our immediate reaction was, oh, well, at least the chainstay length is adjustable. Flipping this switch near the rear axle will allow you to increase it by like 9 millimeters. So 444, that should help a lot for climbing. You can also adjust the head angle. It's 64.5 degrees by default. You can change the headset cup to one that will allow you to go up or down by 1 degree. So down to 63.5 if you so wish. Also, at the bottom of the shock, there is another flip chip that allows you to drop or raise the bottom bracket height. We rode the bike for just short of 2 weeks, so we didn't experiment much with the geometry settings. But the way it's set up now, and I believe that's the default configuration, short chainstays, low bottom bracket, and the mid setting, 64.5 degrees for the head tube angle. And yeah, that felt great. The wheelbase is 1250 something, 1254 for this size S4 bike. And that doesn't sound very long, but that's due to the short rear end. The reach figure reflects the size of this bike more precisely at 480 millimeters, but it doesn't feel like a big size large. And for me, at 181 centimeters, I quite liked the sizing of this bike. So hitting the climbs with the Levo 4 S-Works. We weren't sure what to expect. I mean, a powerful motor can be quite abrupt, combined with a short rear end. Yeah, it might be a bit much to handle. But riding the motor in what I believe is the default settings, with the medium amount of overrun and the medium amount of shuttle mode. Shuttle mode is basically how much the motor amplifies the rider input. At high shuttle mode, you can pedal very carefully, almost just spinning the pedals, and the motor will give you a lot of assistance. But it was set to the mid setting, and that turned out to be a great setting because this motor was so easy to control and to handle. It ramped up the power quite pleasantly. If we bumped the shuttle mode and the motor overrun setting to long, it became a much twitchier, much more aggressive bike. So with medium overrun, medium shuttle mode, and full power, we hit the regular test climb hill. Quite technical, lots of chunky rocks. And it turned out to be a breeze. We started pedaling. With a short rear end, this bike has got a slightly rearward biased balance, and that was just great in the first part of the climb because it was so easy lifting the front end over the medium-sized rocks. And the motor was just pushing constantly. It gave us enough time to level the pedals, clear obstacles, start pedaling again without having any power drop out. The advantage of this was that we could go over bigger obstacles than what we were used to, so we could do straighter lines, avoiding the properly big obstacles. So it was quite easy doing this climb on this bike. Sure, it was bone dry conditions, but it usually is when we do this test, and most likely we would have to step down perhaps the power a tad, perhaps the shuttle mode a tad to make it even more controllable. There is some potential to make it easier to control, but during the entire test in the default settings, max power, it was great. We're doing this climb standing up, and as the climb got steeper, we were just leaning forwards, not noticing much the shorter end really. If we tried to do the steepest part seated, sure, we would notice the shorter end, but that's not really how you ride. I mean, technical, challenging, aggressive riding. You ride a lot standing up. So the climbing balance while seated, it might not be that important. The point is, after doing this climbing test, we never considered extending the rear center, the chainstays, to 444. This was perfectly fine. And as I mentioned, the short rear end, rear wall balance, it sort of defined the bike. When going both on flat terrain and on climbs, we would be slightly back on the bike. And it was quite easy lifting the front. Didn't take much force to lift the front over rocks and roots. And the motor was quite easy to control. It powered up and down quite pleasantly, not too aggressively and abruptly. And it was just constantly pushing us. So I sort of got the feeling that I was on a boat planing, the front end going up and down, front end skipping along the waves. And that was how we were riding this bike. Also on the flatter trails going over root sections, the front end was basically as much up in the air as down, and rear end was just powering through. That was quite intense and quite exhilarating. A lot of fun. So yeah, riding flatter trails, sharp turns, sure, you could feel this is a slightly more burly, heavier bike, especially compared to the SL bikes. So it's a bit slower around sharp, quickly oncoming turns, but it was still a lot of fun, and considering it being a full power EMTB, it performed very well, and I guess that's partly thanks to the shorter rear end, making sure that the wheelbase isn't too long. So descending then, is this bike a bit compact? 150, 160 mil travel? Sure, it's got a 29 wheel up front, 27.5 at the back. I started out a bit carefully, just trying to get a feel for the bike. And we did one of our regular longer descents, and I was sort of braking a bit in the most overgrown, narrow trail sections, and I met this old lady. I had to brake a bit and exchange a couple of words. And afterwards, I was 2 seconds off my fastest time on this descent. So yeah, a properly capable descender, and I wasn't really aware of how quick it was. What I noticed during the descent, I had to lean forward a little bit, which makes sense on a short rear end bike. If I didn't think about it, it felt fine enough, no problem. But just slightly weighing down the handlebars, just slightly pushing through the front wheel and doing hard turns, and the front wheel was gripping so well. It felt so secure, so planted. It kept the line with no issues. This is a great descender, but I wouldn't say it's the strength of the bike. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun. But what stood out was the climbing and the flatter trails. I mean, this bike is fun in every situation. The only problem is the price, really. I mean, even a mid-level, mid-range dentist probably would think twice about buying this. I wouldn't even think once. But there are cheaper Levos out there. Problem is, once you step down from the top of the line, 14,500 euros S-Works, to the Expert and Pro and Comp, you get the weaker motor, 101 Newton meters, 666 watts, the non-S-Works 3.1 motor. We're going to talk more about that in the upcoming motor review, but we tried just dropping the power on this motor ever so slightly, and we can't really say we noticed we had any less fun. I don't think you're at a big disadvantage stepping down to the 101 Newton meters. regular 3.1 motor. So all in all, Specialized has surprised me quite a bit with this new Levo. So many things have changed, and I have to say, it's all for the better. That's it. Appreciate any likes and subscribes. Thanks for watching.